Hello, everyone. On behalf of Matterport, welcome to the webinar. We'll give our attendees a minute to get settled in, and we will start shortly. Let me begin first by saying thank you to all of our attendees today. We really appreciate everyone's time, especially as things may be getting busy towards the end of the year. It's my pleasure to welcome our panelists from the Cushman Wakefield organization. We have Bridget Bennett, who manages property marketing for Cushman Wakefield in Australia, who joins us from New Zealand today. Good morning, Bridget. We have Stephen Johnson, Senior Operations Manager for Technology and Data Solutions at Cushman & Wakefield, and Elizabeth Singer, Senior Project Manager for Cushman & Wakefield, managing the multi-site programs. So thank you for being with us here today. I look forward to our discussion. And then finally, to help us learn a little bit about you, please answer the quick poll about the service line that you may belong to before we move further with our agenda for today. So at this point, we will be fielding our first question. So please be on the lookout in the chat section. So in terms of our agenda, we will start taking a look at the state of digital transformation with Matterport and dive into some of our featured products for today. Then we will launch into our expert panel at Cushman & Wakefield to hear how they have been leveraging Matterport's digital twins to increase efficiency and productivity across their service lines. Finally, we will save time, as I mentioned before, at the end for a live Q&A session. And as I mentioned before, the Q&A section will be manned by our in-house Matterport experts, so feel free to keep those questions coming. So prior to the pandemic, both the residential real estate and commercial real estate sectors were dependent on outdated methods to draw attention to the space's attributes. Agents either relied on digital photos, which offered a very limited understanding of the space, or relied on in-person visits to the sites from potential tenants and buyers, which, as we all can relate to, is a resource-intensive endeavor and lengthens the deal cycle. We saw a significant surge in demand for our technology since the onset of the pandemic, and it has continued to steadily grow. Lockdown restrictions and contamination risks greatly enhanced the need to virtually access sites, and this quickly became an integral part of the zero-touch or touchless transaction experiences. We witnessed similar uptake across the retail, travel and hospitality, industrial, and manufacturing sectors as well. Digital twins offer capabilities such as interactive virtual walkthroughs, as well as tools to better design, plan, build, operate, optimize spaces, cater to the evolving customer needs. More specifically, in the residential real estate and commercial real estate sectors, we have several quantitative benefits that we have outlined here. For leading CRE companies that adopted virtual technology early on and integrated this as part of their touchless transaction strategy, experience up to 85% faster transaction times. The ability to socialize the space simultaneously with multiple tenants and buyers certainly reduces site visit time as well as travel time. And then some of the supplemental benefits from reduced site visits include reduced service resources and costs, as well as CO2 emissions associated with the travel. Further, digitizing facility portfolios and linking them to easily accessible property listing portals have also democratized the accessibility of these spaces virtually to the consumers. In many cases, CRE companies have reduced the property hunting timeline for their tenants from weeks to merely days. In incorporating virtual tours in the digital marketing material has also doubled the number of clicks that these marketing materials would get. Consumers across both CRE and RRE sectors have come to expect virtual tours as being an integral part of their property hunting experience. In a survey conducted recently, 71% of the buyers said that they would purchase a home sight unseen if the listing had a 3D virtual tour associated with it. So keeping this soaring demand in mind, Matterport continues to study the spatial data needs and stays committed to developing more virtual experiences throughout a steady stream of product and feature launches and through our vast partner ecosystem. With an ever-growing list of big brand logos, Matterport's product and services are applicable across multiple space classifications, use cases, and industries. Our platform is unlocking value across multiple industries and accelerating the adoption of our products to drive efficiency in their processes. Right from leveraging our BIM files for understanding the spatial attributes for designing, space planning, or construction activities, or the virtual tour and platform solutions for creating unique immersive experiences in retail or travel and hospitality or manufacturing industries, or may it be leveraging our True Plan to close insurance claims faster, and then finally integrating our virtual tours with IoT systems to simplify facilities management coordination. Matterport's solutions are quickly becoming universally applicable across the built environment. Our most recent Android Capture launch democratizes the access of our technology, allowing anyone with an iPhone or an Android device to capture space in 3D. Later in this presentation, we will be taking a closer look at the schematic floor plans, Matterpaks, BIM files, and virtual staging. But first, let's take a look at Matterport's adoption inside the Cushman Wakefield organization. So as an early adopter, Cushman Wakefield sought Matterport as a solution to help accelerate the process of listing and renting commercial properties for landlords and tenants since before the pandemic. Cushman Wakefield sought a globally scalable solution to quickly begin digitizing its portfolio to drive further efficiencies in its agency leasing services. Matterport's Capture Services offered the right solution. Capture Services, for those of you who are new to it, is our turnkey solution offering under which an organization can draw from our extensive pool of skilled capture technicians who can be readily dispatched to your site almost anywhere in the world to scan the space on your behalf. This streamlines the need for Cushman & Wakefield to manage multiple vendor relationships, eliminates the hassle of purchasing, maintaining, operating, and training users on using this technology, and consistently delivers high-quality outputs. It also aligns with Cushman & Wakefield's tech strategy of working with strategic partners to deliver innovative solutions that are scalable and generate deep insights and create true value. Using Matterport has allowed Cushman & Wakefield real estate professionals to provide its clients with better insights and decision-making and offers a safer, more convenient, and improved method of viewing spaces for investors, occupiers, developers, and asset managers alike. Over time, as awareness of Matterport's technology grew, trials and adoption have steadily grown to other service lines such as project and portfolio management and the PDS group. So over the past 12 months, Cushman & Wakefield has digitized over 1,200 properties across 21 countries, realized 53% cost savings using our global network of capture technicians rather than self-capturing, and enhanced customer services across the business portfolio. So for today's webinar, we have a few Matterport products to highlight specifically given their relevance to the commercial real estate industry. Our first product in the spotlight is the schematic floor plan. Schematic floor plans are an essential marketing property asset, as we all know, and one that is most commonly requested for attracting buyers. For existing buildings, as-built drawings are either harder to locate or drawings on file often don't resemble the current state of spaces. With Matterport, once the 3D virtual tour is ready, after the space is scanned and deposited to your Matterport cloud account, you can order and receive a ready-to-use Matterport floor plan without having to manually measure up the entire property and draft it in your CAD software. Our schematic floor plans are measured based on the standards specified in the International Property Measurement Standards, the IPMS. And then to maximize the accuracy of our plans, our trained capture technicians scan all the rooms completely and ensure that there are no misalignments or other artifacts, interrupting the space. Space is created with an active depth camera such as a Matterport Pro, Pro 2, or BLK 360 typically provide the most accurate results. And then the black and white floor plan that can be downloaded as a zip folder containing .pdf, .png, .svg file formats can be received within 2 days from ordering. The file formats can be readily accessed and added to any viewable and downloadable assets to commercial property listing sites, or can be incorporated in e-brochures or printed material. With our fast and express options, you can receive your ordered schematic floor plans within less than 24 hours or as quickly as 6 hours, respectively. Our next featured product is the Matterpak Point Cloud Bundle. The Matterpak Bundle is a set of downloadable and exportable assets generated from the Matterport 3D data for use by architects, designers, construction professionals, or development professionals. Matterpaks can be imported into a multitude of programs such as 3D Max, Recap, Revit, or Autodesk to kickstart your design development or management process. Once imported in a drafting software, the point cloud can be used to trace the geometry of the space to develop your as-built plans. Construction professionals can also use the ceiling plans and the reflected ceiling plans and the floor plan images for documentation verification and building turnover packages, or simply use the point cloud as part of the QA and QC process. 3D data is usually accurate within 1% of reality on Matterpak. A few things to note on the Matterpak. Please note that the Matterpak bundle is not available for virtual tours that contain scans from a 360 camera or a smartphone capture. Virtual tours must only contain scans from a Matterport Pro, Pro 2, like a BLK 360, and such compatible devices in order to be able to generate and download a Matterpak bundle. And then finally, the Matterpak is a one-time purchase that stays downloaded on your Matterport cloud account and can be downloaded to any other drives for offline access. Our most recently launched product is our direct order Matterport BIM file, which offers a single source of truth on the as-built conditions of a space. Prior to the BIM file launch, customers would often download a Matterpak from the Matterport cloud account, import the point cloud file into a drafting software such as Revit or Autocad to manually trace over and develop the 3D geometry that simulates the attributes of the actual space. With Matterport's BIM files, they completely eliminate the need to do any manual work to recreate this geometry in the drafting software. The product is generated also at a fraction of the conventional costs of surveying and as-built documentation. Matterport's BIM files thus extend the ability for any AEC professional to continue relying on Matterport as a data source at various stages of the building lifecycle. Once you scan your space with any of our compatible cameras, again, the same set of cameras, Pro 2 or BLK 360, you can simply order the BIM file from your cloud account. A couple things to note. To access this asset, the cloud account admin needs to enable the BIM file offerings in the account settings. And then once enabled, any user who has edit access can order a BIM file. On the ordering page for the BIM file in the cloud account, you can view the details for processing times, file format types, as well as sample downloadable files. The file format for the BIM files is .rvt and .dwg for the 2D CAD file. And then finally, the BIM product offering is available at 4 levels of detail. Architecture only, which will contain all basic structural elements of the space as it is visible within the space. These could include your walls, columns, beams, any built-in offsets, closets, counters, etc. All BIM orders will have architecture as the base option, but furniture and or MEP can be added as an additional layer. Architecture and furniture, as the name suggests, would have all the visible architectural elements as well as the furniture elements added on top. Architecture plus MEP will overlay any visible MEP systems along with the architectural elements of the space. MEP systems represented will include any exposed mechanical elements such as your ducts, shafts, piping, plumbing, and electrical details. And finally, our fourth option is the all-in option, which includes architecture, furniture, and MEP all overlaid, as you can see in this video. A few things to note again is that the BIM file will be created for the entire space that is captured in the virtual tour. And pricing and turnaround times depend on the size of the space and the level of detail, whether it's architecture only, architecture plus furniture, architecture and MEP, or the all-in option. And then to further enable ease of use, to be able to readily import the BIM files and point cloud data, we've also launched the Autocad Revit plugin most recently. With this plugin, you can directly import the files from your Matterport cloud account into your Autodesk suite. Our next offering in the spotlight is virtual staging. So virtual staging helps commercial real estate companies that think beyond the sterile empty spaces by using Matterport to create visually engaging and immersive virtual tours that help entice commercial clients to lease or buy properties faster. Looking through 2D floor plans or individually staged photos of a property doesn't really give a true sense of how appealing a space can be. So commercial real estate offers a great opportunity to apply virtual reality for more visually dynamic and engaging listings to accelerate the sales cycle. Virtual staging with Matterport 3D model gives potential tenants an authentic sense of what it would be like to inhabit the space. It's a valuable capability that enables clients to easily visualize major changes such as adding new ceilings, floors, or even entire layouts. With the virtual tour services, a customer organization can agree upon some basic design principles or preset styles or lookbooks that can be readily referenced each time a user places a virtual staging order. Please note that the virtual staging services are not part of the Matterport cloud platform. Once interest is confirmed, Matterport usually works with the customer organization to define the style preference and sets up the ordering process. Any space that is again captured using one of the compatible high-resolution cameras can be virtually staged. For pricing information, please contact your sales agent or customer success manager. With that, we wrap up the presentation part of today's webinar, and we will now move towards our panel discussion. But first, we would love if our audience could answer our second polling question as we wrap up the featured products here. And while we wait for the answers of the second polling question to come in, we have the results of our first polling question. It seems like amongst our attendees, we have most of our attendees represent the property, facilities, or project management service lines. 80% of our attendees represent the product, project, and facilities management service lines, and then the remaining 20% of our attendees today represent the leasing, agency leasing service areas. Thank you for your responses. Moving on, before we segue into our customer panel, I wanted to just pause and extend a big Matterport style thank you to all of our global customers and partners. It's you, our 404,000 subscribers who have helped digitize 5.6 million spaces and counting. That's really defining our frontier ahead. So now, turning our attention to our featured panelists, we have Bridget here today. Thank you, Bridget, for joining us here.
Thanks, Raska. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, bright and early for you.
It is bright and early.
Really glad you were able to join us here. So, Bridget, if you could just, provide an overview of how, you are incorporating the Matterport digital twins in your marketing initiatives in the Cushman Wakefield, Australia region, that would be awesome. And then further, as you elaborate on your answer a little bit, just sharing perhaps with our audience here how these virtual tours are being received by both tenants as well as agents alike.
Yeah, thanks, Rasika. So initially, when the global enterprise announcement came out from Adam Stanley quite a few months ago now, we commenced a fairly comprehensive internal campaign as our first sort of port of call Matterport is not necessarily new technology in Australia, but it is fairly new to the brokers. A lot of them are pretty old school when they like to just put an online listing up on a board. So we sort of went about and did quite a lot of live demonstrations. We really incentivized the take up of the product as well. So from that sort of strong initial internal campaign, we did initially see fairly low uptake of the product. However, of course, I'm sure everybody has heard, Australia has been through a number of lockdowns over the last 24 months, really. And that's really seen a pretty large increase in our Sydney and Melbourne market of the Matterport technology. So we've seen a pretty good increase in the take up of the tours being booked. And what we're encouraging as best practice across the take up of the products is to, first of all, make sure that we've got the brokers understanding how to use the product and how to sell the product to their clients so that they can efficiently, get them as part of the property marketing campaign. And then we work really closely, the marketing team, with the brokers and their support crews to make sure they're using the best practices that we're sort of recommending on how to make sure that they're leveraging and using the technology as best they can. So what you would have seen, hopefully playing on the video just before, is a couple of ways that we use the tours basically, and we like to use it across multiple channels. So firstly, we use it across what we call our EDMs, our electronic direct marketing. We're using these sent to segmented databases to the correct audience, to the correct locations, to the people that are looking for the size of the tenancy that we've got available. What we then do is we make sure that everything is linked back through to Cushman Wakefield. So we've got those EDMs linked back through to our property portal, which is a slightly different run from the rest of the globe. We're a little bit stuck in our ways here in Australia. And then we make sure that we've got the Matterport tours linked on the website. So on our property portal, in a public way, we've got the tours available for our audiences to go straight into and see the spaces that we've got available for lease. What we're also doing is making sure that we're using the Matterport tours as an external URL link on the leading property portals here in Australia, being commercialrealestate.com.au and realcommercial.com.au. The example is actually up on screen right now, so my timing is perfect. What we also do additionally to this is we work really closely with our agents and ensure that they're using really strong keywords across their property listings in the copy of those listings, making sure that they're using words that are going to be really strongly indexed when people are searching, so ensuring that the property addresses across there lots of times, using the words like virtual tour, because a lot of the time people, we notice our audience in Australia, they like to have a little bit of control of their experience when they're searching for their properties. So we're really sort of trying to, without letting go of too much of the narrative of the actual leasing journey, we're trying to put as much of the control back into the audience, whilst also making sure that it's easily searchable and easily accessible for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds like, right there I could hear multiple best practices. So thank you for sharing those with our attendees.
Yeah.
How have, on the tenant side of things, how have tenants been receiving some of these, added digital assets?
It's quite interesting. Obviously, we've done a lot of tours throughout the lockdown process, and of course, what that means is that we're not actually able to get into the buildings. However, what we're able to do is keep that momentum of our campaign going through the use of these digital twins, right? The tenants, it's helping the elimination process for them, right? It's creating a really concise shortlist so that when the lockdowns were lifted, they were able to, rather than going through 15 or 20 properties, they were able to eliminate some of the properties that they knew that weren't going to be quite suitable for them, and then only have to visit 5 properties once the lockdowns were lifted, which ensured that sort of life cycle was a little bit faster for them. Because of those lockdowns that we had here, and some of them were very, very lengthy, the property journey for some of our tenants was greatly shortened, because the search period that they would normally conduct be 3 to 6 months was greatly restricted because of the lockdown. So it really helped keep that momentum flowing, and also gave some of that control that I mentioned before back to the tenants and the audience that was searching for their new home, basically.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a happy outcome for both Cushman and its tenants. So in that sense, has there any way in which tenants have not just relied on tenants and designers alike, in your experience, strictly from a property marketing perspective, uh, has the relevance of Matterport and its technology extended beyond the brokerage use case in any instances? And if you're able to share that a little bit with our attendees here.
Yeah, it's actually it's quite funny you asked that question. Fairly recently, we've come out of our lockdown in Australia, which is good, but unfortunate at the same time because we don't get to spend as much time virtually with each other, and I'm obviously based in New Zealand, so it is a bit tricky. But part of that is that we have seen, unfortunately, a slight sort of decrease from our commercial real estate side of our business. However, we've seen a really large uptake across our PDS business to the point where some of our colleagues in Brisbane have actually gone out and purchased a camera themselves and are starting to integrate it in their day-to-day project management across their long-term projects. So it's really interesting seeing the benefit that they are taking from the technology. I had a call with Dan, who's our account manager down here in Australia the other week, and one of the PDS guys had some questions for me about BIM files and schematic plans and all these sorts of things that we just don't generally use in the commercial real estate world. We're all about floor plans and tours and things like that. So I sort of had to email Dan. I was like, hey, mate, what are all these things? And he's like, oh, that's easy. You just jump on the portal and, click a button and it's delivered to you. The prices are all there. So I'm finding it really interesting, the ease of use that the PDS team have picked up and started using the technology as well. So I'm really interested to see where they go with that as well in the future.
That's awesome. That's really great to hear. I'm glad that we're making the right connections across all the service lines because, as I mentioned before in my presentation, there is really a room for our products across all of the commercial real estate service lines.
Definitely.
So thank you for sharing that with our attendees here. Bridget, as we get wrapping up with your part of the panel discussion here, happy to take in any kinds of results, whether you have had the opportunity to quantify them in terms of what kinds of benefits you've seen, or even anecdotally. I think you shared some of those early on as you talked about the video. Look, but happy to receive them.
We don't track a lot of the data across the products that we're using. However, I think it's something that I'd really like to do. I've just recently completed some data analytics training myself, so I'm kind of into the whole data scene at the minute. So it is something I definitely want to look into doing in 22. But I think importantly for us, and I've touched on it a couple of times, it's about that momentum. It's keeping the campaigns going. Our capital markets team here in Australia are, like most capital markets, they have a huge amount of interest from offshore. So by having these really beautiful 3D tours that are incorporated 360-degree photography, and we've used a lot of meta tags with pieces of information about the property, etc., it's really allowed the cap markets team to continue with their campaigns, be it on or off market. And similarly with our office leasing team, we've had, there was one piece of information that I was able to grab, which I thought was a really interesting one, is that we had our office leasing team in our Melbourne business complete a transaction completely during lockdown, and they used the Matterport technology as part of the virtual tour. So it was a pretty, I think there might have been one or two rules broken. I think there might have been a couple of in-person tours. But yeah, the use of the Matterport technology for that team was pretty paramount to getting that deal across the line for them. So I think just keeping that momentum going and giving the control to some of the audiences is where we're seeing some successes in Australia.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Bridget. Some really great insights shared. Hopefully, our attendees today here benefit from all of the secret sauce best practices that you shared from a property marketing perspective. Really appreciate your presentation. We will now move our attention to our next featured panelist who will be elaborating a use case with the project development service line in Cushman Wakefield. We welcome Steve Johnson here. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
Steve, so perhaps maybe let's start our audience off with helping them understand a little bit about, this particular PDS clients, whatever their data needs or challenges may have been, and why you chose to adopt Matterport as part of your solution for this client.
So this is a project that was run for a client called the Open Society Foundation. They're a charitable organization. They work globally, and they basically try to fund and try to support initiatives for human rights and the promotion of democracy. And they're just a terrific organization to work with. Our contact point for them, and I have to be clear, I was not their contact point for us. I'm speaking for Nicole Macha, who is out of our New York office, and she was basically the point person between Matterport and for the OSF client. So she did a great job of communicating with them, and they expressed an interest. They have, again, being a global organization, trying to solve problems in many different places, and actually a variety of different circumstances globally. They were trying to run construction programs in, well, I'll just start with their two originals, which were Amman, Jordan, and Bogota, Colombia. And they were trying to manage this construction as a centralized organization based in the United States. Mm-hmm. But, the work was going on in multiple places. So they were in a situation where, and this is not necessarily related to lockdown, this is just plain global business, but they ran into several situations where they would frequently just, their leadership were constantly on planes, constantly on phones, trying to manage all of these different construction sites and manage their local construction interactions. And so they got the idea to use Matterport and leverage its ability to really pinpoint accuracy in how construction projects are going. And so instead of just running one Matterport scan, they began to do weekly scans. And so this was kind of, I'm sure you all have seen, the weekly construction video growth, right? And how things change over time. But for them, it was crucial because they're a global organization. They're also globally collaborative. And so they needed to have a common set of experiences even, right? Since this is a 3D tour, they were using it as a common set of immersive 3D experiences in which to make decisions and by which to really track progress. And so that's how this sort of came together. That was their problem to solve. And so that's my first part of the answer. I can elaborate further if you like.
Yeah, that's great, Steve. I am sure our attendees took note of the construction progress documentation highlight reel that played on our screen here. But Steve, you just lightly touched upon how this solution may have facilitated collaboration or reduced requests for information, or just created more visibility across all parties on the construction. Can you elaborate a little bit more and on that part, and perhaps while you're at it, perhaps also elaborating on how the client may have leveraged these virtual tours to meet their current construction documentation needs, as well as how those needs may be evolving in the future more broadly across PDS?
So a little more specifically, having weekly tours, and if you look at kind of the stats on all of their sites, they were having about 9 or 10 people visit that site a week, and these are the people who would normally either have to fly there or get somebody's boots on the ground to get them the data that they needed in order to be able to speak to how the project is coming and where it is going. So for sure, they were able to leverage those to reduce the amount of times that they had to meet face to face. And actually, this was the number I was able to get, which is she was able to estimate that in 1 year they saved about $60,000 worth of travel costs.
Oh wow!
That's real money. And considering we know that Matterports are expensive, but that's return on investment. And so that part actually kind of worked out very well. What I think they were not ready for was, I think they were sort of operating in the beginning under the assumption that it would move like getting photographs, and we would still have to talk to people boots on the ground. And Matterport drove actually a little bit of a change in how people's mindsets approached tracking this progress. So one major change was, obviously they didn't fly to the site as much, but I think a lot of it was just to be able to then really use those immersive 3D experiences to track what was going on and to then have conversations about it. Typically that would have to happen. We'd, fly people to a site. They would see it. They would try to filter through what they're being told versus what they're seeing on the ground. And then those conversations could begin. And what starts to happen when you're able to kind of just use your own immersive technology, you have that conversation from the get-go. And so it did a little bit better job of helping them balance the messaging they were getting from local contractors and boots on the ground, people on site, with what their own eyes were telling them in a very detailed experience. And so it didn't change how they do things early on in the project, but I do think it looks good for being able to impact how they plan and execute future projects. So
Absolutely.
That's the question.
Yeah, it does answer my question. Thank you for a very thorough response there. Steve, you gently touched upon, the use of the need of not having boots on the ground to even capture the 3D virtual tours here. And in that capacity, I understand that, in this case, you may have leveraged Matterport's capture services. So can you share a little bit on behalf of your client, the experience working with capture services team, as well as any benefits you may have experienced from leveraging that?
So yes, definitely. So I can speak to how difficult it is to manage logistics in 5 or 6 or 12 different countries on 5 or 6 or 12 different projects. So this one was a pretty good microcosm for managing 2 pretty serious renovations and construction projects at the same time that they're going on in different places. And one of the things about those logistics is being able to find someone that you can trust. And so globally, and being able to find someone that essentially you push a button or you get a request and then it happens in 2 weeks. It's one thing that gets taken off of your plate, not you buy a camera. And this is nothing against, smaller offices that buy their cameras and do their things. In this particular case, it worked very well to be able to engage Matterport's global network of capture services and say, we need something in Amman, Jordan. And I know that the first answer was, we don't have anybody in Amman, Jordan. Let me get back to you. And
absolutely,
what capture services did, they got back to them. And they found someone in Amman, Jordan, and in Bogota, Colombia, which was a little bit easier. And that was one thing that when you're trying to manage a global organization that is trying to promote democracy and human rights, that knowing that you can call on Matterport to just get the tours done and help us make decisions, I think that had a huge impact. That's another one that I think in their first year, they didn't even, they didn't necessarily know how rich that return on investment was going to be in just fewer headaches. And so I do think they're definitely planning on moving forward with Matterport capture services, and they'll probably hit you with some challenges. I don't know if they're going to do anything in Antarctica or Iceland or someplace that might be harder for you to get at, but I'm sure you'll get some challenges from them.
Well, if a plane or a ship or something gets there, I'm sure that capture services can get there. But that's a really great feedback to hear, Steve, and a testament to the expansive capture services network we've built here at Matterport. So with that, I'm a little bit sensitive of time. I want to make sure we have adequate time for our third panelist here. But Steve, in passing, maybe you alluded to certain ROIs early on in your presentation, but perhaps we summarize some of those benefits real quick.
So this was a little bit tougher, and I suppose ROI is often tougher to be able to track directly. But to say, I finally was able to pin some folks down and say $60,000 in saved travel cost. That's a pretty big deal. It was a little bit harder for them to map out the number of hours saved from people, whether they were shifting from a procedure where they would normally all go to a site and then gather together for a meeting and then gather together for another meeting, that in fact, that was much more like during the week, just visiting these sites individually and reducing the number of meetings. Cushman Wakefield is a pretty good-sized organization, and it is difficult to think about how much you might have saved by not having, by reducing your meetings by 50%. But I think that fits into their category. Time is money.
Absolutely. Absolutely agreed. Well, that was a stellar presentation, Steve. Thank you so much for being with us here today. With that said, we will turn our attention to our third featured panelist, Elizabeth. Welcome, Elizabeth. We are so glad you could be here with us today. So similar to, Bridget and Steve, Elizabeth, if you could, just provide us a brief overview of your client's portfolio, their data needs, and why you may have, chosen to use Matterport as part of your solution for your client.
Yeah. So in August of this year, my client Humana acquired the remaining 40% portfolio or 60% portfolio for Kindred at Home. That left us with 355 locations and two different needs. Number one was just the rebranding effort, which is mostly my lane, and just dealing with the sheer volume. It made it much easier to have a Matterport survey. Imagine the traveling and the reviewing for rebranding at each of those locations. It would be just excessive. And then we had the other piece, which is the future occupancy planning needs for sites, any facility management needs. So that's, and those are the two prongs that we had to manage on our side.
Got it. So perhaps you can, we have some imagery here. Perhaps we can replay that video as we, encourage you to answer our second question for you. Can you elaborate a little bit about how the solution may have facilitated, Matterport's technology may have facilitated the data collection and collaboration needed, or reduced the request for information or revisits to the site as, you undertook this massive, rebranding and signage program?
Yeah. So just in general, every single location needed a brand book. And so that brand book established all the signage that needed to be replaced. So on average, we spend about 5 to 7 minutes reviewing the brand book once the designers have thrown it our way. 5 to 7 minutes. That's 350 times. That's a lot of time. But imagine if you had to look at still photos or just plain documentation from a signage company telling you where the signage should go. This allowed us to actually have a sense of the space, how the business uses the space. A lot of our recommendations were justified by being able to see it in action, like in a 360 format. We actually changed a lot of our recommendations, being able to just simply go in as a review team. We have a review team of about 6 people on average. So we all sit on a call. So having it real time, having decisions made real time is critical when you're dealing with the volume that we have. Within that amount of time, we also discovered some facility maintenance issues that needed to be found, some housekeeping items from a lot of the locations being having a change in staff and COVID, just needing housekeeping or updates to the space. We also identified sites that needed some minor renovations that would not have been within the scope of the signage vendor to call out. So that's all very helpful in my lane. Kindred at Home didn't have a whole lot of documentation for each of their sites. So for the facility people involved to date, this was their first experience even seeing the sites that they have had maintenance, in the past. So that was exciting for them, as well as allowed Humana just to see what they purchased in their acquisition. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Seems like it fulfilled the data needs for multiple parties at once. Having the Matterport virtual tours. That's really great to hear. Perhaps Elizabeth, you can elaborate, from my conversations with you earlier, we learned that there were some Matterpaks downloaded, and perhaps that helped to fulfill additional needs, data needs elsewhere within the organization. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for our attendees?
So we have our Matterpak share site or Matterport share site that we hired a designer to come in and do a CAD conversion. So we had to download the Matterpak. It was, I'm just going to say it, in my opinion, not an expensive ask for downloading them. Like, for what you get, it's certainly beneficial. Mm-hmm. So we downloaded the Matterpak for every single site, and then had a CAD conversion provided to us that is being uploaded to Humana's share site that will be used for future occupancy planning needs. And that's the main thing. As well as one other piece too is some of these locations were shared locations with, a home health and a hospice, we both, currently using the space. These allowed us to understand how are the spaces needing to be separated, which was a surprising benefit that we had not thought about previously. There was even a couple locations that have a different brand. Eventually, they'll have a different name just for a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. And this allowed us to share the links, have the people that needed to make decisions on the new brand and logo, get an understanding of how the space is used and what signage needs to be replaced.
Well, that's awesome. That's really great to hear. I'm glad that your customer Humana discovered Matterport and has been using it in a multitude of different ways to have access to as-built real life data about their sites. Well, that has been incredibly insightful, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your customer use case in this case. We will now, before we set up the live Q&A session for the remainder of the webinar, we will now like to field our third and final polling question, and then open it up with our in-house expert Amir Frank for the live Q&A session. And while we wait for our attendees to answer the third and final polling question, I have the results in for the second polling question that we had fielded around the usefulness and interest about our featured products. It seems like 25% of our attendees today were interested in the schematic floor plans and are likely to utilize that in the near future. And an overwhelming 75% of our attendees are, it seems, highly interested in the BIM file offering, the ready-to-use BIM file that eliminates the need for any manual drafting in any CAD software. All right, we also have the third and final question results here. According to our attendees, again, 67% of our attendees have expressed interest in learning more about the design and construction use cases and the relevance of Matterport's technology for that particular use case. And then 33% of our attendees today would also like to receive information about the facilities management use case and applicability. We will definitely be sending some follow-up materials after this webinar, as well as including a link to the recording of the webinar today. With that said, we will now open up for the live Q&A session for the remainder of the time.
Hi, Reska. Thanks so much. Great webinar and great content. So we are looking for questions. Don't be shy. Everybody that has any questions for any one of our panelists, please do send them in. And we did have a couple questions come in throughout the presentation. One regarding, let me see if I can find it here, virtual staging. I mentioned that there are a couple SDK partners, but what was interesting, Elizabeth, you had mentioned you do the signage. Is that something that you do yourself? Do you scan the Matterport model and apply the signage on top of the Matterport model, so you can kind of have a really, just an experience of what it would look like on site? Is that how that works?
Yeah. So 50-50. So we have a signage partner, and will ultimately likely be the one to also do the installation. So we like having the person that's going to be doing the installation also the one going and doing our scans. So they went and did the scan, sent it to us, and the design team, through that same vendor, created a brand book for every single site. We receive that brand book and we identify as a review team what all needs to be, the scaling of signage. We take measurements using the tools within the Matterpak or the Matterport scan. Yeah, that's
they actually processed the scan themselves. They created the Matterport model themselves and provided you with what it would look like using this new signage.
Exactly, which is far superior than looking at still photos with an overlay on top of that.
Yeah. So the person who asked that, Yannick, if you want to know more about that, go ahead and ask. If you want to know who that signage company is that can provide such a full service experience, that's pretty cool. But I did mention in the chat that we do also have some SDK partners who do provide virtual staging. This is just an open-ended question to anybody. Bridget, I think more so than the rest, because you did mention how with the pandemic and whatnot, it's become just infinitely beneficial because you can kind of run these campaigns. How do you see that going forward? Eventually, I hope the pandemic will be over. Do you see you continuing to do this and incorporate it into your campaigns?
Yeah, interesting question. Thanks for a tricky one. I appreciate it. I think we've seen a flurry of activity since lockdowns have been lifted, right? So everybody's excited. It's summertime over here in Australia and New Zealand. So everybody's getting out and about, getting around the tours and sort of interacting with people again after such, it feels like a really long winter, basically. I don't necessarily think that we'll continue to use the Matterport at the same capacity that we have done during the lockdowns. I think what we will do is it'll change that narrative a little bit in the sense of we'll continue it from an offshore perspective. We've still got pretty close borders across Australia and New Zealand. And we're still continuing to do a lot of capital market transactions. So I think we'll still see a lot of offshore interest from, those sort of buying hubs that we tend to see across the Asia Pacific region. So from that perspective, I think we'll still keep using them. From the agency leasing side of things, I think the brokers do prefer to sort of control that narrative a little bit more when taking people through tours of properties and things like that. What I would be really interested in exploring with the guys further is potentially the use of the mobile devices, the smart devices, and seeing if perhaps there's a couple of brave tech savvy guys out there that are looking to maybe use the mobile app to do some of the tours themselves. And I think I'd really love to see somebody use some voiceover in one of their tours as well. I think that could be quite an interesting, test of people's skills and aptitude. So I think it'll be interesting to see where it does go. I don't have a crystal ball, but if I did, I think I'd be very wealthy. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what 22 brings us.
Well, we are almost at time. Before we drop off, happy to take any last minute questions that may be still coming in. But before we drop off, I wanted to personally thank the entire Cushman Wakefield group of panelists here. Thank you on behalf of Matterport, as well as our Matterport marketing and support team that has been working tirelessly behind the scenes to make this webinar happen. So thank you to the entire team here. And thank you to our attendees for making time for this webinar. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we are at the top of the hour. So, I'd like to extend that as well. And thank you, everybody, for attending, and to Cushman Wakefield for helping us out.
Thanks for having it.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.